Brave exploratory citizens of the Milky Way galaxy, I bring you a warning. A warning about the Game Pass and the trap it represents. Hello again, I am Blunty. Something occurred to me a couple of days ago as I was uploading a video about Starfield, a video where the subject of community-maintained bug fix patches and other mods was kind of the central gravitational point around which flung several astronomical bodies of thoughts and opinions, some of which made certain types of fanboys do the thing that fanboys do and ignore any context or whatever and just imagine what I said instead of listening to what I said and make dopey comments about it. Always fun. But aside from the chuckles that always brings, I also realized there was a huge trap a lot of people might fall into, might be a little bit ignorant of when it comes to Starfield, and one I've personally slammed into before in other games. And I felt a bit silly for not thinking about it earlier, because again, it has affected me personally before. You'd think I'd remember that it was a thing to watch out for, but I didn't until now. But it's not too late because Starfield's still a few weeks away from release. So, what am I talking about? It's everything to do with how we are all going to be playing it, and even more specifically, where we're going to be playing it, and where from, and how this particular trap might be a small generator that produces nothing but regrets. And there are two parts to this trap. It's like a bear trap slamming shut and shattering your tibia, but also some sociopath has painted a thin layer of salt across the trap's teeth, like a well-prepared margarita of regret. So, you know, to really rub some sodium chloride into my rapidly escaping metaphor. And that trap is Xbox Game Pass. I like Game Pass. I like it a lot. I use it. I don't always keep my subscription up, but, you know, I'll have it active for maybe half the year on average for access to specific things. It really is very good value. And Starfield, of course, is one of those things that's bringing such value to Game Pass. Day one right there on PC and Xbox. And as of about a week and a half ago, we finally got confirmation, that it is indeed now tagged as a Play Anywhere title, which means save files seamlessly sync between the Xbox and the PC and back again. The different version of the game, you can just swap where you want to play it if you've got both platforms. It's wonderful. I love when they do that. But that's the second part of the trap. We're going to need to circle back to that. The bone-shattering, snappy part of the trap is mods, or it might be mods. It's no secret that the modding community are in a very significant way responsible for Fallout 4 and especially Skyrim having such tremendously long and active lives. Hands up in the comments section, anyone out there who genuinely believes people would still be playing Skyrim today, certainly in the numbers they are, without mods? From bug fixes to gameplay tweaks to full overhauls, even right through to near complete transformations, mods have enabled players to extract tremendous extra value from these titles that they paid for once. Or 7 times, depending on how addicted you are to Skyrim. Paid for it twice. PC, Switch. Also played in Game Pass, but we'll get back to that. Now, for a long time, it was fine, and I mean, occasionally Bethesda would update a patch of the game in a way that unintentionally broke mods, but then they'd be fixed, and aside from those brief hiccups, everything went smoothly. But then, to Game Pass came the Anniversary Edition of Skyrim. It had everything the Skyrim Special Edition had, plus all the new content from Creation Club mods, including quests and dungeons and bosses and weapons and spells and more. It was very exciting. It also revealed to many gamers for the first time just what a huge pain in the ass Game Pass games on the PC can actually be. Because Game Pass games arrive via the Microsoft Store infrastructure, the Windows Store, and that comes with all kinds of issues. Mostly when it comes to gaming, at least, it's the fact that there's extra DRM. It sits alongside a file structure games from places like Steam don't often use, and also hidden file structures and splitting the game up into different parts of different drives even, and inside secure and inaccessible directories and other such pain in the arseries. And that crap shattered basically every existing mod for Skyrim. It breaks compatibility with the basic modding tools, the executable was even different, all the underpinning dependencies, and all of that happened with the Anniversary Edition. It was just, the community wasn't happy. It is, however, better now, but better doesn't mean good. It's just better than it was. Both Bethesda and Microsoft recognize that it's a deeply undesirable thing for a PC gamer to be so restricted, and so the Anniversary Edition, and indeed games on PC Game Pass in general, these days are a bit more mod-friendly. But it's still far from ideal. Better is not great. And it's a fact that basically the entire modding community works from the most accessible open version of any given game And in this case, that will be the Steam version of Starfield. So, there's a fairly good chance that at least a fair chunk of mods, especially the more ambitious ones, won't work with the Game Pass version, or will be much harder to get working, depending on how much extra effort the community wants to go into and how hard it is to begin with. So if you're concerned about modding, and frankly you should be, if not for the fun transformative stuff down the track, then at least for the community fixes, or towards Bethesda's incompetence that I talked about at length in a video earlier this week, the Steam version is where you are going to want to hang your hat, as it were, or space helmet, I suppose. And a lot of people are doing that over on Steam since the very first day it opened up for pre-order. Even though you could play it for free on Game Pass, it has consistently sat at near the top of the list of top-selling games on Steam. And it is number one in wish lists, and I think has been since day one. Sadly, there's no way to know how many of these pre-orders are for the standard edition and how many are for the premium, the latter of which includes 5 days early access, so kind of desirable for a fair chunk of the player base. So there's no reliable way to gauge how many people have pre-ordered for early access and how many simply wanted to pre-order the game so they can have it pre-installed ready to go on day one. Away you go. Or indeed, how many are doing it because they know about the Game Pass issues that I'm talking about with mods and whatnot. Also know that a lot of people are planning to use the Game Pass version as a kind of a playtest to see if the game lives up to the hype, to see if the game is for them or not, and to get a feel for if it indeed is a game that feels like they'll keep playing it or doing multiple playthroughs, possibly over some years, like many do with Fallout 4 and Skyrim, or if it's just something they feel like they'll play through once and then, whatever. So they play it for a bit on Game Pass, maybe even do a complete playthrough there, and then make the decision if it's actually worth buying for long-term access to play whenever they want, rather than effectively renting it and access being held hostage by a subscription model. Not a bad plan. But now comes the salt on the trap's teeth. Even if you do start on Game Pass with the intent of maybe moving to Steam, if indeed it does feel like a long-term game for you, there's the issue of being able to bring your save file and all of your hours of gameplay with you, because while Play Anywhere means free, the save file moves freely between the Game Pass version on Windows and the Game Pass version on Xbox, it doesn't mean that for the Steam version. Because another little gotcha of Game Pass games is there's sometimes slightly different versions of the game, and that can mean the save files might be inherently incompatible. If you can get to them, meaning they're not buried somewhere or encrypted or otherwise inaccessible because of Windows DRM crappery. I ran into this and another related issue most recently earlier this year as Monster Hunter Rise came to Game Pass. By the time it did come to Game Pass, it had already been on Steam for a year. And guess what? The save files were incompatible. There was, and remains to my knowledge, no way to take your save file from Steam and import it to Game Pass, or vice versa, officially or unofficially. Oh, and much worse than even that, the Game Pass version and the Steam version weren't even cross-play compatible, so there exist two entirely separate and isolated player bases for the same game on PC. Steam users can't multiplayer with PC Game Pass users, and vice versa. It was a catastrophically stupid decision, very, very short-sighted from Capcom, and the player base was, and indeed remains, furious. But of course, Starfield is a single-player only game, so not really an issue there with the multiplayer stuff and crossplay. Just wanted to mention it as one example of one of several traps Game Pass games can have. Now though, the save file thing isn't a consistent thing across Game Pass games. Indeed, some games' saves can be relatively easily manually transferred across. There's even a couple of community-made tools that help people do it with a nice little clean interface and everything. And indeed, the Game Pass version of Skyrim can apparently these days be converted across manually. I'm not sure how long that took to get working, but it sure wasn't the case at launch, because I played it at launch and that wasn't a thing. So, given Starfield and Skyrim do share the same game engine, it's entirely plausible it will be possible to dig out the save file from the Game Pass version, either easily or after a little while when modders figure it out, like they did with the anniversary edition of Skyrim, and then take that recovered save file and just dump it somewhere where Steam expects a save file to be, and the Steam version for it to pick up that save file seamlessly and for it to just work. It might be more complicated than that. or for any number of reasons, it might even be impossible or just implausible or impractical, or just takes a really long time for modders to figure out how a good way to do it is without breaking everything. We don't know. And that's what I'm getting at here. We don't know about this stuff. I'm not trying to scaremonger here. I'm not saying, don't play the Game Pass version. But it is an issue people need to keep an eye on, especially those of you using Game Pass basically as a playtest for Starfield. Because if you do decide you want to play it on an ongoing basis for the sake of mods, for the things like that, you are going to want the Steam version to make modding easier. So you are going to want to move that save file. And maybe you can take your progress with you. Maybe you'll have to start from scratch if you move to Steam. I'm sure modders and the curious types will be trying to do exactly that on day one. So my advice to you is find a player community on Discord or subreddit or wherever you're comfortable, and keep an eye out for people trying this on day one before you decide to plow dozens of hours into the game, just in case. My warning about modding stands though. It's been a while since I checked in on it, but as far as I understand, modding on the Windows Game Pass version of Monster Hunter Rise is now working, but not all of them work, and even the ones that do work can be a bit of a pain in the ass to install, and just sort of issue filled. So it's just way easier and simpler if you want to mod that game, just to be on Steam, because the tools for that version work really well, really well. I imagine the Creation Club style mods will of course be largely issue free, just like they are on Fallout 4 and Skyrim. But again, the deeper stuff, absolutely stick with the Steam version if you have that option. Or just at least keep it in mind if you are playtesting with the Game Pass version. Anyway, hopefully this has been informative, helpful, useful, something. In any case, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above there. I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time out there in the universe. Somewhere. Except the procedural nature of the planets in Starfield mean even if we're on the same planet, we're not necessarily seeing the same things. We're kind of in alternate universes from each other, which is going to be weird, especially if someone tries to make a multiplayer mod.